This looks like a 454 big block, but it could be a complete money pit in disguise. That engine for sale online, you know, the one that seems like a great deal, might just have a fatal flaw that could cost you thousands. Before you get taken for a ride, watch this. We're going to tear into this engine, and I'll show you the secret casting numbers and hidden cracks that separate the legends from the junk. Don't get stuck with a 500-pound boat anchor. Let's figure out exactly what we have here. 1. The allure and the danger. There's a reason we're all drawn to the Chevy big block. It's a straight-up icon of American muscle. The sound, the torque, the history. It's what building a hot rod is all about. From the legendary 427s and Corvettes to the tire-shredding 454 Chevelles, these engines are the heart of horsepower. But here's the hard truth. For every legendary big block out there, there are dozens of worn-out, poorly designed, or cleverly disguised duds just waiting to drain your bank account. Over decades of production, GM made a whole mess of variations, and believe me, not all of them were created equal. Some were built for all-out war on the drag strip. Others were designed for low compression, low revving duty in a 3/4-ton truck, and they're about as performance-oriented as a minivan engine. And that brings us to this greasy thing right here. This was listed online as a good-running 454. It's a little rusty, and its story is a complete mystery. The seller swore it was a solid foundation for a project. But is it a hidden gem or a polished piece of junk? We're about to play detective, and our first clue is the most important one, the casting numbers. 2. The first clue, casting numbers. Before you hand over a single dollar for a big block, you've got to become an expert at finding and decoding its casting numbers. This is the engine's birth certificate, and it tells you pretty much everything you need to know. For most Chevy big blocks, the main block casting number is on a ledge at the rear of the engine, right where the transmission bolts up. It's usually on the driver's side, just behind the cylinder head. On some later model blocks, like a Generation 5 or Generation 6, you might find it on the passenger side of that same ledge. You'll need a wire brush, some degreaser, and a good flashlight, because this area will be caked in decades of grime. You're looking for a 6, 7, or 8-digit number. This number is your key. Once you have it, you can look it up online to know exactly what you're dealing with. It'll tell you the year range, the original displacement, and whether it's a 2-bolt or 4-bolt main block. This is where you separate the heroes from the zeros. Are you looking at a legendary 1969 427 block with 4-bolt mains? Or did you just find a 1975 454 out of a station wagon with peanut-sized ports and heads that can barely breathe? The casting number doesn't lie. There are other important numbers, too. There's a date code, often near the block casting number, that tells you the month, day, and year the block was cast. And up on the front of the block, on the passenger side, there's a small, flat pad where the suffix code is stamped. This code tells you the engine's original gig, what car it came out of, its horsepower rating, and the transmission it had. Together, these numbers paint the whole picture. So let's get this thing cleaned up and see what we've got. 3. The peanut port deception. Once we've identified the block, the next place to investigate is the cylinder heads. And this is where one of the most common big block scams happens, the peanut port deception. Sellers will list an engine as a 454, and let you assume it has the big, desirable oval or rectangular port heads that are capable of making serious power. But many of the later, less desirable big blocks, especially from the late 70s through the early 90s, were stuck with what are known as peanut port heads. The name comes from the intake port's shape, which is way smaller than the large oval ports on earlier, performance-oriented engines. They aren't a true oval, they often look more round and are sometimes described as being wider than they are tall, whereas a real performance oval port is taller than it is wide. So what's the big deal? They are an absolute performance bottleneck. These heads were designed for low RPM torque in heavy trucks and motorhomes. They simply cannot flow enough air to make real power at higher RPMs. For a basic street cruiser, they might be okay, but for any kind of performance build, they're basically scrap metal. Identifying them is key. You can check the casting numbers on the heads themselves, usually visible under the valve covers. But a quick clue can be the engine's original paint. Many desirable oval port engines were Chevy orange, while peanut port engines were often painted blue or black, especially on trucks. Just don't take paint color as gospel, since engines can be easily repainted. Never be fooled by a seller who says, it's an oval port. You need to verify if they are large oval ports or the power-robbing peanut ports. It's the difference between an engine that can make 500 horsepower and one that will struggle to make 300. 4. Fatal flaws, the external inspection. Before we even think about turning a wrench, a good look around the outside can reveal fatal flaws that make an engine totally worthless. You have to look for cracks. Big block Chevys are tough, but they aren't invincible, and decades of abuse, overheating, or freezing can take their toll. The first place to look is the block itself. Check around the freeze plugs for any hairline cracks that could have been caused by water freezing inside the block. Pay close attention to the sides of the block around the main bearing caps. High horsepower can stress this area and cause cracks to form. Next, check out the cylinder heads. Overheating is a common killer of big blocks, and it can cause heads to warp or crack. Look for any signs of water or coolant stains on the outside of the engine, especially around the head gaskets. Sometimes a seller will just spray paint an engine to hide these telltale signs, so look closely for any fresh paint that might be covering up a disaster. Also, be aware of generational quirks. Take the Generation 5 big block, made from 1991 to 1995. These engines have some well-known issues. Unlike the classic Mark IV, they don't have a spot for a mechanical fuel pump, which can complicate a swap into an older car. They also use a non-adjustable valve train, which isn't great for a performance build. Most importantly, they use a one-piece rear main seal, so cranks and oil pans don't swap with the more common Mark IV engines. If you see extruded bosses for the water pump, that's a good sign you're looking at a Generation 5. Knowing these little details can save you a world of headache and money. 5. The teardown, uncovering hidden damage. Alright, this is the moment of truth. The outside looks okay, and the casting numbers tell us it's a mid-80s 454 truck block, not a high-performance legend, but maybe a solid builder. The only way to know for sure is to look inside. First, let's pull the valve covers. We're looking for sludge. Heavy, thick, black sludge is a dead giveaway of severe neglect. We're also looking for broken parts. Are any rocker arms loose? Any pushrods bent? Next, the intake manifold comes off. This gives us our first peek into the lifter valley. What we really hope not to see here is the dreaded milkshake, that creamy, brown sludge that means oil and coolant are mixing. That's a classic sign of a blown head gasket or, even worse, a cracked block or head. If you see that, walk away. The engine is probably toast. Now, let's drop the oil pan. The oil pan is like the engine's diary. It tells the story of its life and death. We'll drain the oil and then run a magnet through the bottom of the pan. What are we looking for? Metal. A few tiny shavings are normal, but if you pull out chunks of metal, you've got a catastrophic failure on your hands. Shiny, non-magnetic flakes are bearing material. Magnetic steel shavings could be from a camshaft, lifters, or even piston rings. This is a huge red flag you can't ignore. Finally, we pull the heads. This is the ultimate reveal. Now we can look right at the cylinder walls. We're checking for deep scratches or scoring that you can catch with your fingernail, a sign that something came apart inside. We're also checking for a ridge at the top of the cylinder. A heavy ridge means the engine has a ton of miles and will definitely need to be bored, which adds cost. We'll also inspect the head gasket itself. Look for any black burn spots between cylinders or between a cylinder and a water jacket. This confirms a blown gasket, which often points to other problems like overheating. This is the kind of detective work you have to be willing to do. It's the only way to protect yourself. If you've ever been burned by buying a bad engine, or if you have a tip that saved you from a money pit, drop it in the comments below. Let's help each other avoid these expensive mistakes. 6. The verdict and the legends. So, what's the final word on our good running 454? Well, our investigation turned up a few things. The block itself seems solid, but the heads are, in fact, peanut ports. Inside, we found clear evidence of a past head gasket leak between cylinders 5 and 7. And there's significant scoring in cylinder 3, probably from a broken ring. This engine isn't a total loss, but it's a long way from a good running motor. It's a complete core that needs a full, expensive rebuild. A money pit, just like we feared. To avoid this fate, focus your search on the legends. Stick to the Mark IV big blocks produced from 1965 to 1990. The 396s and 402s from 65 to 72 are famously overbuilt. The 427s from 66 to 69 are race-bred heroes, often with forged parts. Early 454s, like the LS5 and LS6 from the early 70s, came with high compression and strong internals. Even the later generation 6 454s from 96 to 2001 are great choices, with factory roller cams and improved block designs. The ones to be wary of are the smog-era 454s from the mid to late 70s with their garbage compression ratios, the Generation 5 blocks from 91 to 95 with their quirky designs and part-swapping headaches, and of course, any engine saddled with peanut port heads. That online listing for a cheap big block is tempting, but a deal can turn into a disaster fast. You don't need to be a master mechanic, but you do need to be a good detective. Check those casting numbers, know the difference between peanut and oval ports, and look for the physical signs of abuse and neglect. Knowledge is the only thing that protects your wallet and your project. Don't just buy a big block, buy the right big block.